Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm Jon Macri, joined as always for these start-sit shows by the great Nic Bodiford. Nic, week one was a wild one, as usual. We had some surprisingly pleasant performances from some and some absolute duds from others that we were likely counting on in starting lineups. And naturally, the way fantasy football tends to go, the same thing will probably happen again in week two with just different players. But hopefully we can help get some of those players identified and get lineups set properly here into week two. So what do you say, Nic? You ready to do this again?
Yeah, ready to rock. Let's do it, Jon.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it'll be fun. We got some actual week one data to go through now that isn't from 2023 or anything like that. So it'll be fun, especially as the season goes on and we get a bigger sample size. But yeah, like we did last week, we're going to kind of go through each position minus kickers and talk about some of our favorite and least favorite plays of the week. We'll be leaning into Nic's content, writing up the wide receiver cornerback matchups, as well as like QB and defensive special team streamers. We're going to look at the wide receiver man zone coverage data, O-line, D-line matchup data as well. And I've even gone through Nate's Start Sit article and picked out a couple of names from there that I'd like to include. And obviously Nate's a pretty big part of the team here at PFF, so we'll make sure we include his insight as well, and it'll be like he's here with us in spirit. All right, before we get into week two, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends at DraftKings. TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for six, whatever you call a touchdown. One thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is the number one place to bet touchdowns. If you're ready to place your first NFL bet, try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app today and make your bet. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends September 19th, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms. All right, Nic, let's get right into it with a few quarterbacks at the top, looking at a couple of your favorite streamers of the week, and then I might even get a little spicy with it with a dark horse pick at the end. So who is your first QB streamer of the week?
First one is Matthew Stafford. And for whatever reason, sometimes these rostership rates really significantly vary platform to platform. This one, like Stafford, he's in the 60s on Yahoo, but in the 30s on ESPN. So regardless, I think he should be above 90% at this point, given this matchup. We talked about the Arizona Cardinals defense last week as one to target overall. And I highlighted the fact that their interior defenders, linebackers, safeties, and cornerbacks were all areas to exploit, but noted that their edge rush should at least be somewhat effective. Well, they ended up with the fourth worst pass rush win rate, 16.7%. Graded out as the second worst unit, 53.6 PFF pass rush grade. So they don't even have that going for them. I know that people are concerned about the Rams offensive line. I just don't think that's good. First off, Sean McVay's been scheming around lackluster offensive lines for a long time. But I don't think that's going to be an issue in this game. And specifically, if you look at the strength of the Rams passing offense, Cooper Kupp, and now Colby Parkinson, they both are guys that line up on the interior. Well, last week, Arizona's slot coverage defense ranked fourth worst, allowing an 85.7% catch rate and more than 10 yards per coverage snap. So I think this passing game is going to be totally fine for week two. Matthew Stafford, QB streamer of the week.
Yeah, no, I like it. And yeah, you mentioned the pass rush. Arizona doesn't exactly have an Aiden Hutchinson on their defensive line either. And yeah, Arizona, the coverage unit wasn't great last week, right? Like fourth worst team coverage grade from the week with a 48.8. They allowed the most fantasy points to a quarterback in week one. It was Josh Allen, but still, they also faced the third fewest passing attempts among all teams in week one and still really struggled, right? Like they allowed 5 explosive plays. So those are pass plays of 15 plus yards. That was tied for the fourth most. They allowed 2 passing touchdowns, tied for the third most. And again, didn't even face that many passes. Now, yeah, if they're going up against one of the more pass heavy teams in the league, I think the Rams threw more than anyone in week one with 49 passes. That they're going to spread the defense around as well. They run a ton of 11 personnel, even, without Puka Nacua. So yeah, I'm with you. This is an absolute recipe for success for Matthew Stafford in week 2. Okay, how about another shout out to Baker Mayfield? He made the QB streamer list last week. He delivered, and now he's back. So please tell folks why week 1 was no fluke for Baker.
Yeah, very impressive performance, and he even left one on the table with Jalen McMillan, the touchdown, walk-off TD that bounced off his hands. Jalen McMillan is going to be a household name in like 2 weeks. But anyway, so they've got this matchup against the Lions. The Lions pass rush is very good, but Tampa Bay does have 2 tackles that graded out as top 35 players. I think that as far as just offensive lines across the NFL, this unit, at least on the edge, is as capable of giving Aiden Hutchinson a hard time as anyone is. I don't think that they're going to, just bully him all day, but because he's like the best player in football practically, but they'll be able to keep Baker safe to the point that he's going to be able to distribute the ball. We can get into the nitty gritty here. Detroit's coverage unit is beatable. It ranks 18th in yards allowed per coverage snap, 17th in explosive pass plays allowed rate. I was really impressed with what LA was able to do against Detroit last week because they do have a very talented defense. But when you get into these back and forth shootouts, game script can just kind of go haywire. And Baker he looks like he's going to be a very, very good ball distributor this year. And they didn't even have that. I mean, I know most teams ran the ball a lot last week, but I remember looking at their passing rate. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but it was a lot lower than I thought it was. They're just playing very efficiently. A lot of explosive pass plays. I'm back in on Baker Mayfield this week.
Nice. Yeah, love it. And like you said, like the Bucks offensive line, it's definitely better than what the Rams were last week, and to try to protect against Aiden Hutchinson. But Baker also has done a nice job so far, at least last week too, like in avoiding sacks, had 9.1% pressure to sack conversion rate. That was a top 5 mark for the week. So yeah, it was something that we kind of saw from him a little bit last year too, for parts of the year where he was good at avoiding sacks and getting the ball out quickly. So I'm with you. He's got the weapons. I like Baker Mayfield as a potential start this week as well. All right. I mentioned I might get a little spicy with a potential streaming QB here this week. I know Nate had him as a sit as well. So I'm really kind of going against the grain here, I think, but I'm kind of feeling okay about Aaron Rodgers coming out of week 1, going up against the Tennessee Titans. And I know he did nothing for fantasy. Like the Jets got blown out. So maybe this one is a little crazy. And really just for kind of deep leagues and super flex, potentially DFS here. But I also went against Tennessee in week 1, didn't work out for Caleb Williams, but I'm going to try it one more time because I was at least slightly more encouraged by Aaron Rodgers than it seems most people were after the Monday night game. And again, it's a deeper play anyways. And overall, I think the Titans defense looked good, but I'm kind of expecting a bounce back for the Jets on both sides of the ball this week. And that includes Aaron Rodgers. Like if it starts in the trenches really where the Jets offensive line, they had a difficult matchup against the 49ers and they held up fairly well. They allowed just 1 sack. They rank 11th in our PFF offensive line rankings as well heading into week 2. Again, the 49ers defensive line is among the best in the league, where the Titans defensive line, not so much. They generated a 27.3% pressure rate in week 1. That ranked 24th. So Jets do kind of have an advantage there. And again, I know Rodgers didn't provide much fantasy value in week 1 outside of 1 touchdown pass to Allen Lazard late in the third quarter. But I do think Rodgers' overall performance on Monday night was encouraging, considering he's a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. He earned the second best passing grade of the week from a clean pocket, an 87.5. It also helped that his offensive line only allowed 5 pressured dropbacks, which if they can minimize the pass rush of the 49ers, they should be able to do so against the Titans. Both of Rodgers' big time throws came when kept clean, which included that lone touchdown pass. So one more time, I know this is for deeper leagues only, Superflex, DFS maybe, but after finishing week 1 as like QB 27 for fantasy, he also didn't play the full game when they were getting blown out, which I don't expect to be the case this week either. So I'm feeling kind of fine in believing Rodgers will offer some streaming value for those in need in week 2. So what do you think? Am I nuts for thinking this?
I don't think you're nuts. I would probably consider him more of a QB2 play or 2 QB league play. Titans defense, they have standout players. Their rookie defensive tackle, I'm blanking on his name, but he had a very good week last week. I think we still have more to learn about how Chidobe Awuzie is playing following the ACL tear from 2 years ago. Right now, given the state, like the Jets offensive line, it's an older unit, but they're healthy. They're good to go. It's week 2, so hey, no issues there. Yeah, I think he can be a ball distributor. Gonna need the Tennessee offense to help push the pace.
Yeah.
And like Will Levis is not looking good right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about the Titans passing offense here in a little bit, but yeah, I appreciate you kind of providing some encouragement there for Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at him, like for super flex leagues and things like that, and leagues where my quarterbacks are kind of borderline starters and maybe those 1 QB leagues. But let's talk about a potential sit of the week. We had some success with this one last week. We had Dak Prescott as an avoid. He finished the week as QB 22. And I'm looking at another star NFL quarterback on a big contract here. And no, I'm not talking about Daniel Jones. But instead, my sit this week is Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. So I can't help but feel concerned, discouraged, disappointed, however you want to phrase it, regarding Joe Burrow's week 1 game against New England. It just wasn't good, right? And not what we've come to expect from the Bengals quarterback outside of his start to the season last year, which was kind of eerily similar to what we're seeing right now this year. Not sure if he's dealing with, an injury that might be worse than they're letting on. I know the water bottle video has been going around, but don't want to speculate too much on something like that. Instead, really just kind of concerned with the overall play on the field. And then part of that, has to do with T. Higgins not being out there potentially again this week. Tyler Boyd's off to Tennessee, and Jamar Chase was barely utilized in week 1. So I'm looking at this matchup against Steve Spagnuolo and the Kansas City defense, and there's just no part of me that wants to trust Burrow in week 2. And I understand that there will be leagues where that just can't be helped, right? But I'd be worried, at least until we see him kind of return to form, which is what we had to wait on last year before we can trust him again. But then, it didn't last long before he got hurt again. So this week, looking at the Bengals offensive line, they ranked 25th in our O-line rankings. Shout out to Zoltan for putting those together. And the Kansas City pass rush, like outside of Chris Jones, they're not viewed as elite, but they still pose a ton of problems, right? Like last week, they had the second highest quick pressure rate in the league at 37.3%. That's pressures that occur in 2.5 seconds or less. And I know the Ravens O-line didn't look great either, but Burrow also not great under pressure last week. He completed just 2 passes on 8 dropbacks. His 1 turnover worthy play was against pressure as well. So I'm just worried about Burrow. Like, even though it's only been 1 week, and I try not to overreact after week 1, but we've kind of seen this before, and I'm just not comfortable starting him until we see something more encouraging, I guess.
No notes beyond saying I have him ranked as the QB 13 this week.
Okay, there you go. So he's outside of that top 12 for you as well. And yeah, I'm with you. All right, so enough of the Joe Burrow doom and gloom. Let's talk about some wide receivers where we're feeling good about heading into week 2, and start with the Jaden Daniels led Washington Commanders. Who do you like there this week, Nick?
So Terry McLaurin, and I think that I feel sort of silly for being in on Terry McLaurin as a 6th round pick. Cliff Kingsbury's still doing his thing. I don't understand how a defensive coach like Dan Quinn thinks like, yeah, we should get the guy who does one thing, and that's just that he puts his players in one position and then never moves. That seems like it's a really easy thing to scheme against. So I don't understand why they. Anyway, so we have Terry McLaurin, ex-receiver for the Washington Commanders. He's going up against Deonte Banks. This one's fairly easy to project. McLaurin might become a feature of the wide receiver cornerback matchups because he'll just be on the left side of the field. Right. So if any cornerbacks are glued to the defensive right side, we just, it's easy analysis there. The Giants basically have, and I this is maybe a little bit controversial, but they have basically two good players on defense. They've got Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence. Nobody outside of that has proven themselves. And I know people want to talk about Kayvon Thibodeau, but like he's not doing good things on the field. So tell me when he does. But they had one of the best safeties in football, Xavier McKinney, and they let him walk. And without that guy basically cleaning up everything beyond the defensive line, this unit is just terrible. Terry McLaurin, he's stuck in a frustrating situation, but I think he's just going to run laps around the secondary, and he just needs Jaden Daniels to get it to him on a few plays. So Terry McLaurin, let's see here. What did I have him listed as a high ceiling wide receiver 3. Really wish I could put him as a wide receiver 2, but I think wide receiver 3 who can, 60, 70 yards and a touchdown is I think very reasonable for this matchup.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, you look at the Giants defense, like you said, like allowing 8.7 yards per target. That was 8th worst last week. 15.4% explosive pass play rate allowed, 7th worst. 66.7% open target rate allowed. That was 8th worst. And just a 38.5% success rate in coverage. That was the 4th worst. So Terry McLaurin, quiet week last week. I think 2 catches for 17 yards, but love the bounce back potential for Terry this week.
Cool.
All right, guess who is back again? Detroit Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams came through for us in a big way in week 1. We talked about it last week. Now you've got him as a positive matchup for the wide receiver cornerback matchup perspective as well. So let us know why JMO is going to keep the momentum going here in week 2.
So systemic thing for listeners to know about Tampa Bay. Edge rusher Logan Hall, foot injury. Interior defender Kalijah Cansey, 3rd recorded calf strain in the last 15 months. Backup interior defender Ernest Brown, short-term injury reserve. Zion McCollum, he is practicing, but he is in the concussion protocol. Backup cornerback Josh Hayes, injured his ankle last week. And Bryce Hall, backup cornerback, also, he was carted off with an ankle injury, so we can assume kind of the worst there. They were so thin in the secondary that they ended up taking a safety and putting him out on the perimeter, Christian Izzy, and they took him from safety, put him on the perimeter as a cornerback. We're not sure how the injuries are all going to shake out here. I think it'll probably be what it looked like in the 4th quarter last week. But what we do know is that Jameson Williams, he moves around the formation. He had a 20+% slot rate last week. Maybe it was 20% right on the nose. But they move him all over, and he's going to get a chance to go after this guy, Tyke Smith, 3rd round rookie. Given all of the injuries and the Bucs, I mean, they came into the season with a short-staffed pass rush. You can't lose Kalijah Cansey and Logan Hall. That's bad. Yeah. Jared Goff it's the same thesis as last week. Jared Goff is really good in a clean pocket. Now, Penei Sewell does have an ankle injury. He did not practice yesterday, so we should monitor that. But even if he's out, they still got maybe still the best offensive line in football. Goff, he's just going to sit comfortably back there and pick them apart. So give me the guy who has a competitive chance against Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane in a foot race, who is also an immensely talented receiver in Jameson Williams.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And you mentioned all the injuries for the Buccaneers, and they're arguably their best defensive player, Antoine Winfield Jr., is also out for this game. So they're completely devastated, right? Like their coverage unit was already allowed the second highest rate of open targets in week one at 78.3%. JMO had no problem getting open in week one. He had a 73% separation rate per PFF, which is well above average and arguably even more impressive considering that his average depth of target was 14.6 yards downfield, which was among the highest in the league. So yeah, one of the reasons that we liked JMO last week was the advantage that Lions offensive line provided him in the trenches and in being able to buy Jared Goff some time for those deep throws. And they're going to have that same advantage this week. And then when you take their secondary, specifically Antoine Winfield, out of the equation, like it just makes it all the better for Detroit and their passing attack. So yeah, I'm with you. I think we can absolutely expect back-to-back JMO feast weeks. Okay, how about a couple players going tonight? So by the time many of you are listening to this, you might already know the outcome. But for those that are early, who do you like in Buffalo, Nick?
So the Buffalo pass catching core, they did kind of spread things out, but Khalil Shakir had a really good week last week, and now I've lost my place in my notes here. No, so okay, so he was. What I liked about what they did with him was they basically kept him in the slot, and we do want our guys to be able to play in 2 wide receiver sets, but they ran a lot in 3 wide receiver sets. He is not good on the perimeter, Khalil Shakir, and it kind of scared me in the offseason when they were talking about him being like the full-time number 2. He just needs to go be very efficient in the slot, and I think he's one of these talented sort of pigeonholed players who we can start in plus matchups. I'm probably not starting Khalil Shakir every week, but this is one of them. So last week finished 7th in yards per out run, 2.47, and first overall in catch rate and missed tackles forced with 3. And that's among 34 NFL slot receivers with at least 12 slot receiving snaps. The missed tackles forced aspect is a big deal here. He's going to be going up against Miami Dolphins cornerback Kader Kahu, who has dunked on me personally on Twitter before, but I'm getting revenge on you, Kader, this week. So Kader is 7 missed tackles since dating back to week 1, 2023. Tied for 4th most among qualifying slot defensive backs. He's a decent player, but he's got his weaknesses, and I think that a slippery guy like Khalil Shakir is just going to be able to get open and scoot past him. He's also got a high catch rate allowed rate, low forced incompletion rate, and a high open target rate. So I think that the table is just set nicely here for Khalil Shakir to go have an efficient day against Kader Kahu. Before I turn it back over to you, I do also just want to touch on the Miami Dolphins pass defense as a whole. They lost some. Their pass rush is back, but they had some personnel turnover at safety. And last week we saw Jalen Ramsey just get foot raced by Brian Thomas Jr. Keon Coleman, more of he's athletic in a phone booth. Doesn't have a ton of long speed, but he was an excellent kick returner last year. You get the ball in his hands, and he is very good at just making guys miss. I almost wrote up Keon Coleman against Jalen Ramsey in this article this week, and thinking about how that sounds like, whew, that's really going out on a limb there. But I don't hate the matchup, and I think if you are really in need of a flex play, I think that Keon Coleman can and should be started, and certainly in DFS. Everybody should go read Nathan Yonke's snap count breakdown for the Buffalo offense. But Keon was cycling in there regularly. I don't remember which X receiver finished with the highest snap count. It might have been him, but it was very promising usage for the rookie in week 1.
Yeah. No, I like the matchup here for Buffalo's passing attack, like you just laid out. And yeah, Kader Kohu, he got picked on week 1, didn't perform well. I had 33.1 coverage grade as the primary nickel corner there. And Miami's slot coverage unit as a whole allowed 7.7 yards per target, which was 11th most. It might not sound all that bad, but that also included 5 combined drops or overthrows where the Jags targeted the slot, which was the most in the league last week. So there was definitely meat left on the bone there, where Kohu's stat line, which was already not good, could have been even worse, right? So yeah, I'm with you. Love Khalil Shakir tonight, and definitely in on this Buffalo passing offense still. All right, let's get into some wide receivers to avoid this week now. Sticking with your wide receiver cornerback matchups, Nick, what the hell do we do with the Browns passing offense?
Yeah, so I had this one as Jerry Jeudy as a matchup to avoid against Tyson Campbell, and then like an hour and a half ago, Tyson Campbell was put on injured reserve with a hamstring injury. It raises Jeudy's scoring potential slightly, but both of this team's tackles have yet to return from knee injuries suffered more than a year ago. Deshaun Watson is a disaster. I don't like the guy, and he can't play football anymore.
Right.
Jerry Jeudy is not the best pass catcher on the team. That's Amari Cooper. I think it was Elijah Moore who actually ran the most routes. It's just a terrible situation. And even with Tyson Campbell out, Jeudy, he lines up in the slot occasionally. The slot coverage here for Jacksonville is pretty decent. Darnell Savage is the guy who leads the way in that regard. I don't want to start. I mean, Amari Cooper maybe is a wide receiver 3, but it's really bad in Cleveland. And even with Campbell getting injured, this is not a matchup that I want to target.
Yeah, and I think it's one that people might be tempted to go and get Jerry Jeudy because David Njoku's out, kind of thing, right? So I don't think this is the matchup necessarily to do it either. Like, I know the corners aren't good for Jacksonville, especially with Campbell out, but overall, like, the defense from like a data standpoint was relatively good against Miami, who has a high powered offense last week. Like, they ranked 8th best in overall defensive coverage success rate, 56.8%. They were right in the middle of the pack in first down touchdown rate allowed through the air. So you look at the Browns passing offense, that's the big thing for me. Like, it's not anything close to what Miami presented in week 1. Like, and I'm with you. I have almost no confidence in Deshaun Watson either. Like, started to feel optimistic about him at points this offseason, but there's really just nothing there right now. So I'm avoiding with you. Okay, my next pick for a sit candidate this week is one coming off a pretty strong week 1. I went with Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints going up against the Dallas Cowboys. This one really was part of the offensive line, defensive line matchups that I had covered, which the article will be out on Friday. The Saints offensive line delivered a pretty strong performance in week 1 against the Carolina Panthers, though. That matchup definitely becomes more difficult in week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys. The Saints ranked 23rd in PFF's offensive line rankings heading into week 2. And you look at the Dallas defensive line, their pass rush generated a 42.9% pressure rate in week 1. That was the 3rd best mark in the league. Obviously, they have Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Their 69.2 team pass rush grade ranked 5th best coming out of week 1. Shaheed, again, coming off a good week 1, he delivered 73 yards and a touchdown, finished as the PPR wide receiver 15. This week's matchup, I think, provides reason for regression for Shaheed and the Saints, because Dallas expects to bring a lot more pressure to Derek Carr. Carr was pressured on just 3 of his 25 total dropbacks in week 1. That was the fewest among all quarterbacks. He did hit that touchdown to Shaheed under pressure, but the Cowboys defense as a whole should be able to provide much more resistance and coverage as well. That unit looked really good under Mike Zimmer, their first game. They're a lot more zone heavy this past week. So Shaheed wasn't likely a starter in like shallower leagues in week 1, but for those looking to kind of chase his production following that nice performance, week 2, I don't think is the week to do it in those same kind of formats.
Yeah, he's probably down to like a wide receiver 4 for me. I haven't finalized rankings, but it's an unideal situation.
Yeah. Then another couple wide receivers here from the wide receiver cornerback matchup, Nick. We talked about the Browns offense or passing offense not looking great. I think the same could be said about the Titans passing offense in week 1. So who are you avoiding in Tennessee this week, Nick?
Yeah, so Calvin Ridley, he got a little bit more interior access, but lined up 46.3% wide left, 31.5% wide right, which sets him up for either a shadow matchup against Sauce Gardner or part-time snap share against DJ Reed, Sauce is probably the best cornerback in football, and DJ Reed is he's certainly the best number 2. He can probably go be a number 1 on 15 teams. And even if Ridley does go into the slot, they have Michael Carter Jr., who is one of the best statistically last year. I think he was the best slot cornerback in the NFL. The Jets do need more pass rush help, so let's see if Hassan Reddick returns. But this is as unfun of a coverage matchup as you can draw up, and with an errant arm like Will Levis, I mean, Ridley may only narrowly catch more passes than the Jets secondary.
Yeah, this Titans passing game, it didn't look good in week 1, despite all the new weapons and Will Levis going into year 2. And that was against the Bears defense, who we don't necessarily expect to be amazing by any means. Right now, again, facing the Jets, who are one of the better defenses in the league, despite what week 1 will tell you against the 49ers elite offense. I'm with you. The Jets defense for me just primed for a bounce back. I expect them to take advantage of Will Levis and company this week. All right, one more name on the wide receivers to avoid right now from the wide receiver cornerback article, Nick. We know Jordan Love suffered a knee injury in week 1. He's potentially out here for a couple weeks. We don't know for sure. They've left the door open for Sunday. I don't know. But naturally, that's going to have us maybe tempering expectations for the Green Bay pass catchers. But you've highlighted one player specifically, Nick.
Yeah, Romeo Doubs, he's out there for a lot of routes, but he's pretty stationary, lined up wide left 64% of the time. And just comparing him to Green Bay pass catchers with at least 15 receiving snaps, he was only 4th in target rate, and he doesn't do a whole lot with it on his own. He was also 4th in yards after the catch per reception. He 1.47 yards per run. It was 2nd among qualifiers, but if you look at the way that I think Matt LaFleur is going to call this game, it's going to be a lot of carries, and they're going to do a lot of jet sweeps with Jaden Reed and trying to get the ball in Jaden Reed's hands right around the line of scrimmage. And he averaged 4.93 yards per out run. So I just don't think that Romeo Doubs, I think he's going to block most of this game. He's going up against Indianapolis Colts cornerback Jalen Jones. He is fine. He's nothing special, but he tied for 15th in targeted rate at 11.1%, also 11th in catch rate allowed, 2nd forced in completion rate, 50%. He's, I think, a serviceable perimeter cornerback, and on the snaps where Kenny Moore is not in the slot, Doubs may also end up going against him, which is, Kenny Moore is a more talented player than Romeo Doubs is. So I think for the time being, I don't think that there's any Green Bay wide receiver outside of Jaden Reed who I would feel good about starting with Malik Willis under center.
Yeah, that's part of the big reason for me as well, right? Like, there's going to be fantasy value. We talked about Romeo Doubs on the waiver wire show, just in leading the team in routes run kind of thing. Like, that's encouraging for him, but specifically with better matchups, right? And he's just not necessarily getting that in week 2. Also worth noting that the Indianapolis Colts were among the most zone-heavy coverage units in the league in week 1. That was something that Jaden Reed feasted on against the Eagles, with 100% of his overall wide receiver 1 production, by the way, came against zone coverage, where Romeo Doubs ended up being more efficient against man coverage. He had a 20% target rate, 0.49 PPR points per route run, compared to 0.17 and a 16.7% target rate against zone. So small sample there, as everything is coming out of week 1, but just wanted to add that in there, in that Jaden Reed definitely performs better against zone, and he would definitely still be the only one that I'd even consider in Green Bay right now. Okay, quick ad break from our friends at BetterHelp. Hey everyone, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you'd like, or was that lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back-to-school era could come at any age. Therapy can be really useful to get a better understanding of how your mind actually works, and to become more aware of your own patterns of behavior and how to improve them. It's useful for everybody, not just people struggling with something specific. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is a convenient, flexible, and entirely online way to get therapy that's right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you could switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/PFF fantasy to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF fantasy. All right, let's dive into some running backs now. And the first name I included from my offensive line, defensive line matchup article is Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Browns offensive line earned the 4th highest run blocking grade in week 1 with an 82.9. Meanwhile, the Jaguars defensive line ranked 28th in run defense grade with a 39.8 this past week, with the 4th worst negatively graded play rate at 71.4% as well. So Jerome Ford wasn't necessarily dominant with his opportunities in week 1. He faced a much tougher Dallas Cowboys defensive line than I think we can expect here in week 2, but he did at least dominate the running back touches, which is a good start, right? He took 12 of the 14 running back carries for this team, was a lot more one-sided in his favor than we saw last season. He also had the 9th highest percentage of his rushing yards come before contact, which was at 38.6% among 34 qualifying running backs in week 1, thanks to that strong performance by the offensive line. So Ford's usage and basically advantage in the trenches is kind of what I'm looking at here to allow him for a much better fantasy performance in week 2 as a potential flex play, really.
Yeah, so the Jags defense is very weird in that it's heavily invested in the linebacker core and then not a whole lot else, which is not a great way to build a team. The defensive line definitely can be pushed around. I think that this is totally reasonable start here for Jerome Ford.
Yeah, and the thing that was really weird coming out of that game in week 1 for Jacksonville with a new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, you mentioned that how invested they are in that linebacker core, but they rotated those guys way more than they ever have in the past, where even Foye Oluokun was coming off the field for about 15% of the defensive snaps as well. Devin Lloyd was even a lot higher. So just a weird rotation there that was happening. I don't know if we'll see that again in week 2, but just another thing to kind of keep in mind. All right, next one. Shout out to Nathan Yonke. This is one of the ones I pulled from his Start Sit article, which you could read now on PFF.com. J.K. Dobbins of the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Carolina Panthers. So J.K. Dobbins was definitely one of the hot topic players from last week because we just didn't know what to fully expect from the Chargers backfield. We knew that they'd probably be a run-heavy team, but we didn't necessarily know what the splits were going to be. But also, we weren't quite sure what J.K. Dobbins was going to look like coming off of so many injuries, right? And then in week 1, we got some really encouraging signs from J.K. Dobbins, 10 carries for 135 yards and a touchdown, 7.8 yards per carry. That led the position. As far as usage goes, he did split the early downs almost right down the middle with Gus Edwards, but he handled almost all of the third down work and a lot of the short yardage work as well, which excluded, I think, 1 goal line carry. So we kind of knew Edwards would see the majority of the goal line work considering his success there last year, but Dobbins getting at least some of the short yardage work could mean that he gets some of those touches as well as the Chargers kind of get more of those opportunities. So Nate also noted in his Start Sit piece that the Chargers are favorites in this game, so could open things up for them to run the ball a lot more if they're playing with the lead. Last week, the Panthers faced the highest percentage of run plays in the league because they were down so bad against the Saints, which ultimately led to 180 rushing yards allowed, the 3rd highest mark of the week. So imagine we could see something similar against for the Chargers in week 2.
So, J.K. Dobbins, I think he is fine this week. I would advise listeners to sell high. I just can't imagine that he is able to remain healthy. And they did show, even with Gus Edwards running terribly, that they still kept him involved. So I think that they're handling Dobbins smartly. He can go be efficient while he's healthy. I'm hoping that he proves me wrong. It'd be really cool. Makes me super nervous. As for this Carolina defense, though, they did make the defenses to target and exploit both the pass defense and the run defense because their 2 best players were Brian Burns, who they traded away, and Derek Brown, who just landed on season-ending injured reserve. He's going to have a full meniscus repair. Derek Brown, one of the best defensive linemen in football. He was amazing. He's a phenomenal pass rusher, but as in run defense, among 67 NFL defensive linemen with at least 265 run defense snaps in 2023, Brown ties for 5th in tackles for loss or no gain, 14, grades out as the 4th best qualifying player, 90 PFF run defense grade, and ranks number 1 overall in stops with 50, which was 12 more than the next closest player. He is in a tier of his own in run defense. Without him in there, I think J.K. Dobbins can just fall forward to fantasy points. And so this week I am in. His health just makes me nervous long term.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. It's a good way of looking at it too, right? Like, yeah, Derek Brown was an insane tackler for the interior defensive line that last year. Nobody was even close to him. But yeah, for J.K. Dobbins too, I don't mind the idea of selling high. Like we've seen it before from him, like where it just doesn't last, right? And it's no guarantee that it's going to as well. So I'm with you. I think that makes perfect sense. We also have a couple avoids at the running back position. The first one also coming from the O-line, D-line matchup article. Jaleel McLaughlin of the Denver Broncos going against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Broncos offensive line earned just a 47.1 run blocking grade in week 1, which ranked 31st. Their offensive line also generated only 10.1% of the team's rushing yards before contact, which was the 4th worst mark of week 1. The Steelers defensive line earned a 69.5 run defense grade in week 1. That ranked 5th. Steelers defensive line also generated the 3rd highest percentage of positively graded plays against the run, 68.2%. So McLaughlin, he did emerge as the Broncos backfield leader in terms of carries and early down work. However, he also saw the lowest percentage of yards before contact in the league among running backs with at least 10 carries, with negative 7.4% of his yards coming before contact, as he was constantly not making it to the line of scrimmage without someone getting a hand on him. As a result, he tied for the 11th highest stuffed run rate among 33 qualifying running backs in week 1. And yeah, the matchup just not getting any easier here in week 2, going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith and company. He was a waiver wire claim. I like him as a waiver wire claim, but I'm not putting him from the waivers right into my starting lineup in week 2 if I can afford it.
Yeah, Jaleel McLaughlin, probably only a starter for like 0 RB2 teams, and it's just a bet on volume because apparently he's the Broncos starting running back. But to add to your negative points here, both the Denver Broncos left tackle and center are currently injured. We don't know if they're going to play. I think one of them had a calf injury, and I'm blanking on the center, but they were already bad and now they're hurt. So that does not improve things.
Yeah, not a great situation to step into right now. How about another one from Nate's Start Sit article? So looking at a running back to avoid this week, Nate put Zamir White of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Baltimore Ravens. So first off, that Nate notes in the article that the Raiders are 9.5-point underdogs against Baltimore on the road. That's the biggest spread of the week. Also my survivor pool pick. So hoping it pans out. We are expecting the Raiders to be playing from behind, which doesn't bode well for Zamir White, who did not play any of the 3rd downs or 2-minute drill snaps, which are the kind of obvious passing situations that we expect them to be in a little bit more this week while playing catch up. Alexander Mattison handled all of that work. So for White, when he was on the field and getting carries, it also doesn't really bode well. The Ravens defense allowed just 3.6 yards per rush attempt in week 1. That was tied for the 6th best on the week. They only allowed 1 explosive run for a 5.3% explosive run rate allowed, which was 3rd best. So it wasn't an efficient game for Kansas City running the ball in week 1, even though they didn't do it often, but I'd expect that to be the same, if not worse, for the Raiders here in week 2 going against Baltimore.
Yeah. I think I drafted 50 teams across best ball and redraft and dynasty and everything this offseason, and I didn't draft Zamir White on a single one. He's a day 3 pick, couldn't earn work on his own for 2 years. It just was not. And then it was just not a good situation. And then he got backseated by Alexander Mattison.
Just crazy.
Yeah. If you can sell Zamir White for anything, I would say do it. It's so bad. Yeah, it's so bad.
Yeah, when you lose snaps to Alexander Mattison, who was like basically the most inefficient running back in the league last season, like it's not a great start. Yeah, not looking good for Zamir White so far. But let's talk some tight ends now. And the hottest tight end topic of the week has to be the Baltimore Ravens tight ends. This one feels like it happened a month ago, but only happened just a week from today. So Isaiah Likely versus Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll kind of I guess just talk about them in general, how we're feeling about them, because Nate also covered Isaiah Likely in the start sit this week, had him as a start, but I at least feel compelled to kind of cover it this week as well, where Mark Andrews didn't do anything in week one, and Isaiah Likely ended up being the overall fantasy tight end one. So usage wise, if we look at it, we talked about it on the waiver wire show, but both Likely and Andrews were on the field a lot together. So it wasn't necessarily that Likely was getting more snaps than Andrews. Andrews actually did see slightly more snaps for what it's worth, but the usage just led to Likely as the primary target. And this was something we talked about on the waiver show as well, but Andrews ran a much higher rate of vertical routes, so go, post, seam, corners than we would typically see from him, or at least we would typically see more from Isaiah Likely. He was at 28% of his routes being vertical routes, while Likely was just 11% handling a lot of the underneath work. Last year, Likely was running about 26% of his routes from the vertical route tree when Andrews was in the lineup. So those roles were flipped a little bit this past week. Nate also noted that Andrews was double covered a lot more, which took him out of the game, but also speaks to maybe a specific game plan by both the Chiefs and the Ravens offense in kind of recognizing this, and that they were going to take away Mark Andrews from the game. So they made sure to utilize Likely a little bit more. So I guess like all these kind of points just to say that I'm not like panicking on Mark Andrews, but at the same time, I'm at least encouraged by Isaiah Likely's usage. So I guess the big question is if you're rostering both Likely and Andrews, which is definitely possible. I have at least a few leagues that I have both of them. And you're starting one and sitting the other this week. Which one kind of gets the call for you? I'll let you go, Nick.
That's a really difficult question to answer. So, all right, let me talk through this, I'll answer that. Ravens, the most 2 tight end sets in week one, the fewest 3 wide receiver sets in week one. This is what we've been waiting for a long time. We're trying to figure out why they continue to run out like Nelson Aguilar and Rashad Bateman instead of doing this. And they finally did it, and it was awesome. Steve Spagnuolo, DC, the Kansas City Chiefs, he has a long history of shutting down Mark Andrews. So was this a product of that situation? And is the Baltimore coaching staff going to go be a donkey this week and just go, no, we only did that one time because Spags is really good and he shuts down Mark Andrews, so we just elevated Likely. I think this week will clarify a lot about whether or not they are just a 12 personnel based defense. Would I start Likely over Andrews? Yeah, I would, but I'm fine going with give me the crazy high ceiling. And like Mark Andrews, he came back really quickly from a high ankle sprain fracture, and it was a small sample size after he returned. He's an older player. Isaiah Likely is basically a wide receiver, and they can have Andrews block. They can have Likely go be awesome as a receiver. Which one? I think I would probably start Likely. But it's really hard. Like I don't know how I'm gonna rank these two guys. Maybe we do have the first Gronk Aaron Hernandez scenario, in the last like 10 years. Maybe that's what this is. If Likely's would I start him? Okay, so to the listener, like the prudent thing to do is to start Mark Andrews. What would I do? I'd probably galaxy brain myself into Isaiah Likely. Let me hit you with a couple names though, because I think a lot of these, like a lot of managers probably just added Likely, and now they're going, well, what do I do? What if I already had an elite tight end? Not Mark Andrews, but like Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, whatever. Just name game here in the flex. Isaiah Likely or Rashid Shaheed?
Likely.
Isaiah Likely or JSN?
I would probably ride with Likely.
Isaiah Likely or Cortland Sutton?
Denver is playing. I think I still like Likely.
Okay, last one. Isaiah Likely or George Pickens?
I think I go Pickens. I know Nate's got him as right? Yeah, it's tough. And you know what? It's actually probably really close because the Steelers are a run-heavy offense as well, so maybe it is still likely. But I'm with you. Like I'm leaning towards starting Likely if I have both of them, if I have Likely and Andrews, just because that usage was so encouraging in week 1. And again, maybe it turns out to be like just the game plan specific thing going against Spagnolo and the Chiefs, but I think we work off of what we've seen on the field and use that as the data that we have. And in that case, like maybe Mark Andrews isn't fully healthy, where I would lean, towards another positive or a pro in Likely's favor. So that being said, like if I have just Andrews, I'm not benching Mark Andrews. Like I'll still start him in week 2, no problem. If he's my tight end 1, but if I'm choosing between the two, I'm probably giving a little bit of an edge to Isaiah Likely.
Yeah. And I, mea culpa here. Pat Surtain made me eat my words last week. And I think the idea of him shadowing George Pickens in his one role as running down the field in a straight line on the perimeter, like I think Isaiah Likely is probably
just
for me there.
It's hard, right? Because like what we've seen most recently is always going to give us some kind of recency bias. Like, and Likely was so good in week 1 where, everybody else was like, even JSN, like, if you asked me that question going into week 1, it wouldn't even be close. Right. But it's just, it's one of those things you just, sometimes you ride the hot hand a little bit and, the usage kind of shows itself and it looks pretty positive for Isaiah Likely. All right, another tight end I liked quite a bit this week, and I don't usually cover tight ends in the offensive line, defensive line matchup article, but Dallas Goedert did stand out for me this week of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Atlanta Falcons. The Eagles offensive line earned an 88.1 pass blocking grade in week 1. That ranked as the second best mark in the league. They also rank as our second best offensive line heading into the week. The Falcons defensive line earned just a 54.2 pass rush grade in week 1, which ranked 30th. Atlanta generated just a 20.7% pressure rate that ranked 29th. Goddard had run 30 routes in week 1, and he caught just 2 catches for 28 yards. And he finished as the PPR tight end 12 for the week, which highlights kind of the state of the position coming out of that first week. But he did see 4 targets overall, with all 4 of those targets coming on the 17 routes where there was no pressure on the play, for a 23.5% target rate. That ranked only behind Devontae Smith on the team. On the 13 routes where there was pressure on the play, Goddard didn't see any targets, while even players like Jahan Dotson, Johnny Wilson were targeted. So it's a small sample, as everything coming out of week 1 is again, but this was very common last season with Goddard as well, where he ranked 7th on the team in target rate when there was pressure on the play at 10.4%. And then he was 2nd on the team with no pressure on the play at 23.4%. So one of those potential trends there where, clean pocket leads to more Dallas Goedert looks, and somebody that I feel pretty good about in week 2.
I can see it. This one's a little harder for me, because the way to attack the Falcons defense is at the cornerback position. Yeah. AJ Terrell, he allows too much productivity. I think he allows a lot of productivity. D. Alford and Mike Hughes, they're just not very good players. The safety position is like quietly maybe
it's really good.
The best. Yeah. I don't understand that Justin Simmons hate 2-time defending second team all pro safety. And Jesse Bates, I'll have to think about this. That might be the best safety duo in the NFL. Their linebackers, they're all right. I go back and forth with wanting to target them for linebacker purposes, but I kind of think this linebacker and safety core is going to create some problems for Dallas Goedert. He might be able to go out there if we're talking like the 4 targets again thing. Then that I can see that. And maybe depending on the format or depending on your build, that's really all you need. To me, this looks like they're going to feed AJ Brown and they're just going to hope that he can go one-on-one with the safety, because I don't think that like Mike Hughes is going to be able to get into his face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a fair way to look at it too. And the other thing I was thinking about with Atlanta's defense too, like it's a new defensive coordinator coming in with Jimmy Lake. They're bringing in that kind of Rams system. So it was the most zone heavy defense in the NFL in week 1. And for tight ends, that's definitely an advantage, more so than facing man coverage. So for me, like he's not going to see like kind of a lot of one-on-one stuff. It's just a lot more of him kind of work in the middle of the field, finding those holes in zone and taking advantage of that. So that was part of it for me as well for Dallas Goedert. But let's wrap up talking some defense and special team streamers of the week. Nick, you got a couple good picks here, and let's start with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, so just checking to make sure that the okay, wow. So when grading initially closed on Sunday, New England Patriots left tackle Chukwuma Okorafor had a 1.7 PFF pass blocking grade. It appears as though it has now been finalized as a 0.0. He was benched after 12 snaps.
God,
that's insane. So he was benched for a 2022 6th round pick, Vidarian Lowe, who I guess beat him out with a 59.6 PFF pass blocking grade. Seattle, they're down their top edge rusher in Ukena Nwosu, but they're still they were very good. They were able to generate pressure. McDonald's week 1 blitz designs yielded the 9th highest quarterback pressure rate, 43.8% among NFL defenses via the blitz. They like this, and this is what McDonald does. He's very good at utilizing 3 safety sets and fielding a creative defense that makes it difficult for the opposing offense to game plan against with this sort of ramshackle offensive line. And we talked about this last week. I do think it would be better for Drake May to be out there because hey, so they got the victory, so maybe I shouldn't go that far. I just think that this is going to be it's a very bad offensive line, and Jacoby Brissett, he can throw the ball away. I'll give him credit for avoiding sacks to some degree, but I think Seattle is going to be able to get after them. The Okorafor thing is like
right. Yeah, that's hilarious. It's always jarring when you see a 0 grade for an offensive line. It's just it's absolutely brutal. But yeah, I'm with you. Like Seattle's defense, they were probably one of the more impressive units in the league in week 1. Like I know it was against the Broncos, who aren't like an elite offense by any means, but neither is New England, who Seattle's playing this week, right? So Mike McDonald had these guys kind of playing on fire in week 1. They tied for the second fewest average yards allowed per play at 3.4. They had 7 tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage. That was a top 5 mark. They allowed the lowest positive EPA percentage in the league at 27.5%. Second lowest percentage of successful offensive plays allowed, 21.7%. So they were excellent. So I'm definitely with you riding the wave here against the Patriots if we can. And then you got one more defense special team streamer this week. Who do you like?
Yeah, Indianapolis Colts. So we talked about it previously, going up against the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay is implied to score just 18.75 points per PFF green line. Malik Willis is a sort of I called him a dink and dunk passer with moderate rushing skills among 72 NFL quarterbacks with at least 90 dropbacks from 2022 to week 1, 2024. Willis owns the position's highest short of the sticks throwing rate at 62.7%. That is not how you move the ball downfield. That's not how you pick up first downs. You pick up first downs by at least throwing past the sticks. And you go look at his rushing data, and it's sort of a mixed bag. I think he had a high forced tackle rate, but wasn't very good after contact. It's just not a great situation for him. I think he's going to throw some interceptions, and I think Indianapolis, who is a very good front seven, they're just going to be able to make life difficult for him.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, you look at the Colts defense too. Like this was a defense last year that could sack the quarterback. Like they weren't like an amazing pass rush grade wise, but they always found a way to get home. They started off hot this year as well. They had the 3rd highest sack rate in week 1. And like you said, potentially going up against Malik Willis here, it's probably going to be Malik Willis. And if you look at his pressure to sack conversion rate, let me check my notes from week 1, 100%. No, it was just one quarterback pressure that turned into a sack because he only had the 2 dropbacks or whatever it was. But so I kid there in using that as a sample from last week. But his pressure to sack conversion rate for his NFL career hasn't been good, right? At 33.3%. So this could definitely be a nice way to even get those sacks at the very least for that defensive special teams of the Indianapolis Colts. But that's it. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed that, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us a ton as well. Nick, massive thank you to you as well for doing this with me again. Before you go, please do remind everyone what you have up on pff.com this week.
Yep. QB defense streamers of the week, wide receiver cornerback matchups to target and avoid, and then three defenses to exploit. And this show.
Beautiful. Love it. Definitely check out Nick's work. As for me, I wrote up the wide receiver man zone coverage report, which is out now, as well as the offensive line, defensive line matchups to target and avoid. That'll be out on Friday. IDP rankings, IDP fantasy report are also out now for my fellow IDP degens. And make sure to check out Nate's rankings, start, sit, and recapped articles as well. Good luck to everyone in week 2. And until next time, peace out.